your hamstrings, you tighten your lower back. If your players sit down for even half an hour, there's an acute residual shortening of that muscle length. And so they just need a longer warm-up. So be aware of the fact that sedentary activities are not necessarily a form of recovery. They can actually make some sort of muscles fatigue. So think about it. You're still a hunter-gatherer and you should be squatting. Oh, what are the fatigue considerations for you as a coach? Do you have a system in place for quantifying workload? One of the problems that occurred when I worked at the Institute of Sport, and I worked there for 12 years, is that for team sports especially, it was really hard to quantify how much work is done in training and how much is done in the competition. So, but if you can collate the two pieces of information, you've got an idea of workload, and then you can manipulate that if you want improvements or if you've had problems from the previous year. But how do you quantify training? Do you have a system in place? So that's something you should think about. We designed something for netball which was quite good, using the coach's assessment of RPEs and the player's assessment of RPEs. And this was validated by some measures by the physiologist. So it means that the coach can get a handle of how much work is done in training, and that includes the gym work as well. How do you sequence what you want to train? As a general rule of thumb, the thing that you want to train for that week should be trained when the player's at his freshest. So if you're going to train for speed, don't go and tire the guys out with a weight session first. So basically think about what it is that you want to focus on and train that capacity or that particular item when the player's as fresh as possible. There are different strategies. There's a heap of different strategies to apply for different types of fatigue. You can be selective and you can individualise it. At the high performance end, you must individualise it because the players will get bored with it. For junior times, if you're dealing with junior clubs, it's too difficult to do that, and giving them a good set routine will be a good start. When do you do it? Well, the general rule of thumb is also as soon as possible. The sooner you get over fatigue, the sooner the player bounces back, the better the effect is. And I will give you an example later on from the New Zealand All Blacks in 2001. And as I say, you need to individualise it. Every player will respond differently, but they need to learn some good techniques. Okay, how do you know if your players are improving? What sort of markers do you use? What's a good measure of how effective your training is? Testing. Does the test reflect what you do in a game? Some of them don't. Any idea? What is coach? What do you see?
Performance.
Intensity and performance, yeah. The sort of things that you look for probably are the reliability and consistency of performance. I'm going to get onto that. I looked at rugby union because I've done quite a lot of work with them, and I thought, well, are there times in the game when fatigue is expressed because people are playing poorly? And you have your stats and you have everything else. I only used a little one. And so when I was doing all the work with the rugby union in the 2000-2001, this is the 2000 Super 12 year. And this is the Brumbies on the left and the Crusaders on the right. And this is for the whole season when tries were scored. Simple little thing. I've done this with soccer and a few other sports. On the left you've got blue and yellow. It's kind of a little funny in this light. And blue represents the first half when tries were scored, and the yellow is the second half. Underneath that is when were tries scored against that team. And conversely, this is for red and black for the Crusaders. Now 2000, the for and against record for the Brumbies was absolutely fantastic. It wasn't as, the Crusaders weren't as good, but the Crusaders won in the end because they'd actually scouted their opposition very nicely, slowed the game down, and then had anti-emergence. And you can see though that there are definite patterns. If you say to a player, even a junior player, when do you score tries in a game usually? What time of the game? And they'll tell you. What do they tell me? What's your opinion on that? How do you know when they're most vulnerable?
When they're tight.
When they're tight, so when is that likely to be?
End of the first half.
End of the first half, end of the second half. The thing that struck me that I hadn't realised until I did some work on soccer in the mid-90s was that period immediately after half-time. Is that a danger time? Is it related to fatigue? No, it's not, is it? It's mental, exactly. The players actually know that. Even the younger players, when I've done work with Brian Johnson's boys, you'll say, okay guys, when you're likely to win or lose points? It's a wonderful opportunity. When we looked at the 2000, and Eddie Jones was really annoyed because they'd lost that final when they should have won, he put in strategies the following year. He wanted to increase the workload of his players by 30%. And he said to me, we want a recovery consultant to come on board and work with us so that we can actually look at how to make the guys work harder, because there's certain things I want to train, but I also don't want them to get injured. And so I'll tell you what we had to monitor at the end. But basically the idea is that there are times like the half-time break where you've got an opportunity to take advantage of your opposition. So we looked at simple little recovery strategies at half-time that the players could do. And one of the things that I came out with was the fact that if they changed their tops at half-time, the idea of putting on a clean top makes you feel as though you're starting the game from the beginning. That wasn't my idea. That was Andre Agassi's idea, because when he won the 2001 Australian Open and he was interviewed at the end, they said, oh, you change your top an awful lot. He said, yeah, it's not just a matter of being sweaty. He said, every time I put my top on, I get a new surge of drive because I feel as though I'm starting the match from the beginning. So there's a psychological thing there. So we just put a few little things in place that would help the players start the game off. And you can see that the Brumbies always try to take advantage of that first 5 minutes in the second half. That same pattern occurs in AFL. The third quarter is always the dangerous quarter. They've got 20 minutes, so you've got players like Adam Goods, but also do a few other things, like have a shower. Whereas I was saying, recovery strategies themselves are collected from a number of areas. How you balance the type of work with the type of rest, things that are eaten and drunk, how they get panel beaten, if you like, what sort of physical strategies there are, and psychological skills strategies. It's no good just to do one and not the others. It's my belief that probably there are only small benefits from each one of those, but collectively you get a significant change. And so you need to incorporate all aspects of all. So in terms of work and rest, to measure how well a player is adapting to training is quite difficult. There are what the Russians always call 3 levels of observation of adaptation in a player or an athlete. The first is the athlete's observation of himself. How does he think he's going? What should he measure? The second is the coach's observation, and the third is the sports science and sports medicine observation. So having taken those 3 levels, what is it that people should look for? First of all, we know that there's quite a lot of research being done on adaptation in athletes. We know that training diaries help us identify in advance that athletes are getting tired or they're getting sick. We know that those training diaries are very, very useful. We also know that most team sports don't keep them. Is that a fair comment? Do any of you have players who keep training diaries? One? Any others? When I said this to Eddie Jones, he said, well, we're not likely to keep them. And I said, but it's really important every day that the player just even notes. And I have a chart I designed for basketball at the AS, which takes 30 seconds a day for a player just to fill in on how they feel. And he said, oh, that's far too complicated for a rugby player. Get it down to 15 seconds. So basically, the first thing is, does the player feel tired after training? They should. Does the player continue to feel tired? Well, that's a problem. You should be able to get over that fatigue as a normal part of your adaptive response. So one of the first things we try and monitor is how well they get over their fatigue. Of the variables that are recommended in the research, these are the most often used. The ones about resting morning heart rate, very useful, doesn't cost anything. But most athletes, not even just team sports athletes, forget to take it on in a reliable and consistent manner. Quality of sleep is absolutely important. Who got a bad night's sleep last night? Nobody? Who got a good night's sleep last night? Okay, excellent. Sleep's a really important thing, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, because the sleep that the athlete gets can actually impact on his ability to adapt better. So on a rating of a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being excellent and 5 being terrible, then how did you rate your sleep? How do you rate your fatigue or energy levels? So you've got plenty of petrol in the tank, do you feel sharp? Muscle soreness, it's a part of training. Delayed onset muscle soreness is not a sickness. It's only a problem if it persists for more than 3 or 4 days. It's an adaptive response to the body. You can minimise that sensation doing certain things, but it's a normal response. It shouldn't last too long, that's all. The most important variable of all in all the research that's come out is how confident a player feels. If a player feels confident, it's usually a sign that he's pretty healthy. Now that's an interesting one because it's come out of research in North America and Australia and in Europe. See, I said to Brian Johnson's players, and these are just the young kids, I said, do you know if your opposition's not confident? You know, if you've got it over them? And they'll say yes, and I say, well, what do you look for? And I'll say, oh, well, you can tell their body language, their eyes, they're slow off the mark, they don't quite know what to do. You ask a player what it looks like when someone's not confident, they will describe someone they see or have seen in a game.